At a Tim Hortons.
And welcome back to the Michigan Insider, Sports Talk 1050, WTK The Ticket. We are online at WTK.com, and it's the 9 o'clock hour, so we say hello to the guys from the MGoBlog Roundtable as Sam is off to Lucas Oil Stadium for day 2 of Big Ten Media Days. Of course, that is headlined by Jim Harbaugh at the podium at 12:30. Plus, Michigan's 3-player representatives will be at their podiums at around 1:15. We'll have full coverage tomorrow of today's day 2 here on the Michigan Insider. But as I said, it's now time for the last MGoBlog Roundtable of July. In fact, it's the last MGoBlog Roundtable before fall camp begins. Hello, fellas. Good morning, Brian Cook. How are you?
Good. When you said last MGoBlog Roundtable, I thought we were canceled.
Just of July and before fall camp opens. Very, very specific. Seth, good morning. Again, you were briefly with us in the last segment. Good morning again from the outlet.
Good morning. I'm calling in from Tim Hortons in West Branch, Michigan, because my family wanted to be up north by this afternoon, and I had to be on the radio. So this is the way we did it.
And good morning, Craig. Craig, how are you, Craig?
I'm doing fine from the hobbit hole in my basement.
So it looks like you have power, and so that's good.
Yeah, I've had power the whole time.
One of us here doesn't have power at home. So anyway, we'll talk football here as we are rolling along. Of course, the talk of the week is the coming off of the reports that came out on Tuesday. So let's just jump right in. Brian, we'll start with you. Your reaction when the reports started to surface about the negotiations between Michigan and the NCAA about a potential Jim Harbaugh 4-game suspension and the other penalties.
Basically, a lot of Anchorman memes. I'm not even mad. I'm impressed. That escalated quickly. Just basically, I turned into one of those guys who only makes references to movies in my head for about 30 seconds. But yeah, the contrast between what's happening at Michigan and what's happened at Tennessee, where they had a blatant pay-for-play scandal where Jeremy Pruitt was preying on the corpse of George Floyd as he gave $300 to various people out in sacks of lunch bags. It's just what are we even doing here? So it just seems like, the NCAA thought they had something here, and they're like, oh, I'm not a totally useless person. I can do something. And so that's what they're doing. And I feel like, this doesn't matter. Nobody is taking this seriously. Nobody's taking the Tennessee thing seriously. And as soon as the suspension is over, the only people who are going to mention it are Michigan State fans on the Red Cedar message board. And then that's it. Nobody's ever going to bring it up again. Not even the Ohio State fans. They're going to be like, nobody cares about this.
Ohio State fans are already there.
Michigan State fans just had their best day in probably 2 years. They got Jim Harbaugh suspended, and the upcoming Michigan State game is at night, so they can throw batteries at us. Says Mike Valenti.
Yeah, very responsible commentary from Detroit radio. It is actually pretty funny that as the reporting came out, Seth, that you have Paul Feinbaum yesterday defending Jim Harbaugh. You've got Ohio State defending Jim Harbaugh. The only people, to Brian's point, that are agreeing with the NCAA and going after Michigan are Michigan State people. Everybody else is just going WTF, basically.
Well, the problem is everyone on the Ohio State beat is very much on record saying lying to the NCAA is okay. So it's very hard to backtrack that one. Harbaugh did get more than Urban Meyer got. Urban Meyer, by the way, only didn't get to coach the games. I thought maybe they'd do that for Jim, right? Where you can coach the week, but can't.
It sounds like it's going to be for game day only.
Anyone knows anything about coaching, that's the one day that they get off. All you do is walk coming down the sidelines and try to make sure your players aren't bored during the commercials.
And call timeouts when appropriate, hopefully.
Yeah, but I by now I think they have somebody in his ear doing that. Otherwise, because you remember when he was doing it himself, they were not getting time clock management very right.
Yeah. The Ohio State fans, as far as I can tell, are completely nonplussed by this. Find it to be a non-issue. Valenti's comments are beyond the reprehensible, because I was actually hit in the head with a thrown bottle at Michigan State. For no particular reason except wearing a Michigan sweatshirt, as far as I can tell. And and in a game where Michigan State actually won, so you'd assume they would have been happy. So it's, for a person in the media to suggest Michigan State fans should throw batteries at Michigan fans is quite remarkable. But there it is. I mean, do you guys have a feeling about who will coach or who will be the sort of figurehead coach beyond Seth's idea of tryouts?
It was a good idea, Seth.
I figured
up
Hart's
all
going to get a day because the idea is, especially if it's only the day of, they're really not going to change the way that they call plays, except for the day Sharon Moore's out, right? But I think everything else, they're going to give somebody a day in the spotlight. And if anybody on this staff really would like to have a day where the camera's on him and he's roaming up and down the sidelines with a microphone and everything, it's Mike Hart. And I want him at a presser. I love Hart at pressers. Hart at pressers is the best pressers we've ever had.
Yeah, when they told Jim that you're gonna have 4 post-game or 4 game days that you're not gonna do in-game interviews, post-game press conferences, that kind of stuff, he might have said sign me up. So maybe that might be his negotiation. Is as long as it's that part of it, I guess I'm cool with it. I mean, we all know it's the 4 games that it is. It is not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And Seth, you're right. Structurally, it's Monday through or Sunday through Friday, where almost everything the head coach does actually is done Sunday through Friday. So that's the case. But it'll be interesting to see, in particular, that game where they don't have Sharon, what they do. You don't have Sharon, and if they don't stagger Grant, so they add, to add a couple different staffers and how they'll handle that for that. Do you guys have an idea of what you would? Because that's a little bit different. Because that actually is who is calling the plays that day.
Yeah, I mean, what I would do is, since it's probably going to be a very bad East Carolina team, is I would let fans call the plays.
Sorry, I'm trying to.
That's a bad idea because we're going to be
not a bad
run
idea.
JJ, run JJ again.
No, I don't think so. I think Brian's on something because fans understand that against East Carolina, JJ needs to be in bubble wrap. And so if you want
fans do not understand that.
Fans, no, I think enough
what
fans.
What section are you sitting in?
All right, so go to the score.
Throw the ball. Run the ball. Everything, whatever they're doing it wrong.
Go to the score. Do one of the scoreboards. Text 55555 and text A if you want to run to the right, B if you want to run to the left, and C if you want to pass play.
They have the hashtag Go Blue already, right? Where you can and they can put you on the thing, so they can put you on the thing, and you hold up the card, right? Run zone, power left, counter right.
Because Sam said something about about us filling in and calling the plays that for against East Carolina that Sam and I could call the plays, and I said I don't know if we could actually fill in, and then I took that back because I know how to pronounce duo right, I know how to pronounce duo left, and against East Carolina you probably don't have to do a whole lot more than that. Although we want to see more than that, you probably don't have to do a whole lot more than that. But if I'm the head coach for the game. Yeah, JJ is going to be playing a quarter. Donovan Blake are playing a quarter. And then
keep in mind their play calls are packaged as well. So all you have to do is call the group, right? And they did this against Penn State. I think they said they called the same group 16 times in a row at Penn State in 2016. So I mean, you could just whatever that call is, right? Let's do that one. It's the duo or counter or it's a throw for it.
I stand by the scene from the last game in Varsity Blues. Give Davis Warren the headset and let him call the plays and just let him do it.
Well, I mean, whoever's wearing the headset
JJ coach
isn't necessarily salient, right? I mean, I assume the defense is going to be left intact.
Yeah, the defense won't have anything happen to it whatsoever.
Yeah, and then Sharon is out for a game, so they'll have Mike Hart call the plays, and whoever they put on the headset hardly matters. Like I say, I suggest Tom Brady, but because he ain't working that week as far as I know, but whoever else they can use, they use. Jay Harbaugh would be fine because you have limited slippage there. As a
Please,
matter of
please say
fact.
MGoBlog Reader Tom Brady. I mean, make sure
Yeah.
you use the entire title there.
Okay, MGoBlog Reader Tom
Known
Brady.
MGoBlog Reader Tom
That's,
Brady.
that is only to differentiate him from Michigan track athlete Tom Brady. That's how you have to differentiate.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
MGoBlog
The
reader
distance
Tom
running.
Brady. He has nothing else on his resume. And
Yeah.
Michigan track athlete Tom Brady, because that's how you differentiate the
Right.
differentiate the two.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I really do hope that Harbaugh doesn't come out and say, "Well, no comment. This is all pending." I really would like.
He can't say anything more than that, can he?
I think most of it is going to be that, because most of it he can't
I hope
comment if they're
not.
negotiating or whatever. I think he could comment on, if he wanted to, about, as Sam and I were talking about, if someone asks about structurally, if you're out and Sharon is at whatever, they could maybe ask kind of questions like that. But I think he's going to punt on most things that involve. Fact is, how much does he like talk about himself anyway? He likes talking about his team. He likes talking about his guys. He doesn't like talk about himself anyway. So it makes it easier to punt on questions that are about him being suspended.
Well, I would like for him to say is, look, I never told a single thing to the NCAA that was untrue. Anything that I talked to them was true, and leave it at that.
Well, that could be a part of your. That's essentially a no comment. I have been utterly truthful with the NCAA. I have nothing else that I can say about it right now. But you could.
Right. That would be good. That would be good enough.
As Sam said, find a way to slide in the statement. I don't lie. I didn't lie. I'm not a liar.
I don't care. I mean, our whole thing is like what they say to the press does not really matter unless they say something completely beyond the pale. The best thing that comes out of the Big Ten meetings is it used to be Michael Spath, but somebody goes around and asks people things off the record about the other teams.
The anonymous about the other teams. Yeah,
that's the only thing I care about that comes out of Big Ten meetings.
All right. Speaking of Big Ten Media Days, let's shift away from Michigan. Well, obviously, this conversation will be continuing because we'll get more over the course of the next week between now and when you guys are back on, or maybe the next few weeks when you guys obviously are here on the show. But Media Days opened up yesterday. Tony Petitti was first. Nothing really all that exciting about from Tony Petitti, I don't think. But the real stuff for most of us comes from the last speaker at the podium yesterday, which is Ryan Day. And the first one, we talk about this almost every week. I feel like every time I'm talking with you guys, it comes up every week. Because Ryan Day loves to talk about a play here or there, or a handful of plays. And I actually kind of gotten the mindset now, don't we want him thinking that way as he gets his team ready for the season and ready for Michigan, that it only was a handful of plays, a play here or a play there, considering that's all he could ever say it feels like about that game? It seems like that actually works in Michigan's favor.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what he thinks it is, that's great for Michigan. Like, if Ryan Day is sitting around just thinking about, like, oh, well, if we hadn't busted 7 times, we would have been good. And if his philosophy isn't like, okay, the reason that happened was because we didn't feel like we could defend Michigan straight up because we're a little soft on the interior of our defense because they don't face the kind of running game that Michigan has, then that is good for Michigan. And, like, all the stuff that CJ Stroud was saying after everything that happened, where it's like, this doesn't define me. Great. Yeah. Think that. That's great. I think that's a good attitude for all Ohio State players to have. If we beat Michigan, it's nice. And if we don't, I'm just going to go to the league. That's great. So yeah, I agree with that. That's the kind of attitude we want from Ohio State's head coach.
I mean, the guy is 31-2 career against the Big Ten, right? And if he's 39-3 against the Big Ten next year at the end of the year, he could get fired. There is no man on earth who wants this game to be just another game more than Ryan Day. It's the only thing. It's the only thing they got against him, right? Like, he can win the big one. He comes unprepared sometimes for the beginning of the season. Some of his hires have been a little, weird. He's no Urban Meyer. But the guy has been winning every single Big Ten game except for 2. And what's the only thing anyone wants to focus on? Those 2. Go for it, Ohio State. Think about the other 31 Big Ten wins that this guy has, and don't think about those. That game doesn't matter. Just let that game go. Call it a loss.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, I think there's a good chance sitting here right now that Ohio State will lose to Michigan again. I mean, certainly a reasonable chance. And if they win the rest of their games, I don't see them firing Ryan Day. I mean, that's an absurdity to have a guy 39-3, say, in the Big Ten being fired. Makes no sense to me. But
I mean, Michigan has cornerback. The one issue on this team is like we need a second cornerback. What does Ohio State have? Ridiculously awesome wide receivers. I would not get confident about that game just yet.
well, I'm not confident, but I certainly think it's a game where right now, if you were picking the game right now, at worst, it's a coin flip, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we were talking last week about whether the game was whether those were upsets, right? The last two wins.
No.
And we got, and we just use that as an excuse to talk 45-23 as much as we wanted to. But it does feel like this year it is just more evenly matched as far as like the talent on the field, with level Michigan's going to be playing at, the expectations in the beginning of the season, where that game is. I can't. Last year we were like, yeah, just imagine, right? This year we're like, yeah, it's not hard to imagine.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to say something, Brian.
I don't think I did.
Oh, okay. I thought I cut you off.
It's a good assumption, but
that's a good assumption.
Glenn
Okay.
puts in on the message that he really likes how I enjoyed that all OSU players at Media Day, et cetera, all only have experience losing to Michigan. What a reversal. It's true, because we've had this conversation. And one of the biggest differences between the last X amount of games and this one is, for the first time in a while, Michigan comes in with by far the edge of the experience position. Sam and I talked a fair amount about the Ohio State quarterback position earlier. Ryan Day gave some sort of a comment about, we've gone through this before, but when they got to the last few quarterbacks, we all kind of knew going into camp, like, who was going to be the guy, and the guy ran away with the job. And it doesn't sound like that's the case this year. I know we're 30 whatever days till the season and then 13 weeks until the game. So that's really what matters, the extended time that he's going to get whoever the winner is to get ready for the game. But they've got great receivers, which is going to help that quarterback, but they don't seem to be very confident in what they have getting ready for the start of the season at quarterback, which I'm good with, but it's definitely an impact on them.
There's a big difference between like, okay, well, now it's going to be Dwayne Haskins. We know Dwayne Haskins is the guy because what he did against Michigan after an injury. Now it's going to be CJ Stroud, and CJ Stroud is going to be the second pick in the draft. And what we saw in the spring game from Ohio State, it didn't look like it's going to be an obvious transition of power, which is the first time I think that's happened. God, when's the last time Ohio State had a questionable guy at quarterback? Was it Joe Bowserman? Is it that far away?
Oh, Bowserman.
I mean, I guess a freshman Braxton Miller.
Yeah.
So after the Tressel scandal, they had even then they had Braxton Miller ready to go, except he was a true freshman, and they go 6-6. And I think this is the first time since then that their quarterback position has been up in the air. And then compounding that is from what we saw in the spring game from Ohio State is that they couldn't pass protect. And, we know that Ohio State has pretty good pass rush, but this was like an every down thing where, like, even if you were playing a team with a good pass rush, if you're going up against a good offensive line, that player, the quarterback's going to have some time. That didn't look to be the case in the Ohio State spring game. It looked like their tackles were a huge concern. And so that combination could kind of set them back. And, I don't think necessarily that there's a whole lot of Big Ten teams that are going to be able to take advantage of it. So they do have pretty much a whole season to get right at those two positions before playing Michigan. And even if they drop one, Michigan will still be for all the marbles.
Yeah, and they obviously non-conference doesn't impact Big Ten play. They do play Notre Dame, so they have that game.
Say what, Seth?
I think the floor is not too bad for them, though. Like, Kyle McCord was a 5-star quarterback. He knows how to play a little. I mean, he's had some backup snaps, and he's like, I know he's not the guy. He hasn't seized the job, but it's not like Michigan State's quarterback situation where you're like,
no,
it
isn't. But
Noah Kim can pass.
It isn't like Ohio State's usual quarterback situation.
All right.
Where you're just kind of debating like where in the first round is this guy going to go. I think they might have a little bit of a step back here. And there are teams that can weather that just fine. Like Georgia just won 2 national championships with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. But Ohio State doesn't seem like they're in that situation exactly. I mean, maybe they'll get a bump in the defense because they're going to be in their second year under the same coordinator, and that generally does happen. But Ohio State doesn't strike me as a program currently that can just rely on their defense to get them through when they can't move the ball. And we'll see. But that Ohio State spring game was perhaps the most encouraging I have encountered.
How different is that Ohio State offense even in the last couple of years? Just if they get average quarterback play as opposed to elite quarterback play, right? There's a huge difference in their team, especially last year. I mean, considering they scored 3 points in the second half against Michigan with that elite quarterback play, and they're not necessarily going to get that this year, definitely is a big difference. And I really liked hearing Ryan Day talking about he was basically saying it was the same thing as getting to CJ Stroud and getting to Dwayne Haskins. As he's saying that, I'm like, it's not the same. It's definitely not the same. So I like hearing him say funny, silly things, which he said a lot of yesterday, in fact.
Yeah. Looking to Ohio State, I mean, they've lost by what to us? By 17 and 21 the last couple of years with a quarterback who was
22.
22. Get it
Sorry.
right, Greg.
Yes, come on.
22.
Short change by 1.
That's right. It was 40. So with a quarterback who went second in the draft, is that right? And they're not going to get that. It's unlikely they're going to get that quality of quarterback play this year. And so to me, right at the moment, I'm thinking is a very reasonable possibility that Ryan Day loses that game too. I think there's no possibility that he's fired because if that event would happen. So we'll see. But right now, I think most people have Michigan as the favorite to win the Big Ten right now, and I think reasonably, my point of view.
Outside of some power thing, I don't know, was it ESPN's computer things this morning on TV showed me that Ohio State has a 71% chance or something like that of beating Michigan, and I just laughed and turned the channel and moved on.
71%. I don't know.
That was some silly number. Their season comes down to basically, I'm sure their fans will tell you, their season comes down to 3 games, right? The Notre Dame game, the Penn State game, and the Michigan game, and they'll tell you that they'll win all 3. But those are the 3 games that their quarterback and their coach and everybody else will get judged on. I guess you get judged on the other ones too if you lose them, but I don't think anyone's going to predict them to lose the other 9.
If you were letting a computer pick this game right now, I would say the computer would probably pick Ohio State because what it's looking at is how much do you return? What's the quality of the guys coming up? Especially they look at that junior class.
Mm-hmm.
So that the class with the JT Tuimoloau and like the Jack Sawyer, like that is a bang up class. They have like one of the best recruiting classes of all time. Unfortunately for them, Georgia also had one of the best recruiting classes of all time. So everyone's just kind of pushing each other higher. I got to give Ryan Day credit. He can develop quarterbacks. I'm not going to even start to imagine until I actually see it on the field that like Ohio State quarterback play is going to be anything below like an A- because Ryan Day plus those receivers, plus they have I know the offensive line looked bad against 2 great pass rushers, but it's probably not going to be the same against most of the Big Ten. Like they're going to destroy Michigan. They have Michigan State at night. That game is going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, and the thing is, as we know, they have 13 weeks to get their quarterback ready for the game that we focus on too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, Kyle McCord had 34 passing attempts in that spring game. 34. And he had 184 yards. That's like 5 and change.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And we know that, their tackles are a problem. And he got sacked 3 times. So he's under siege the whole time. I know he doesn't have the receivers he's going to have for most of the day. He did have a third of those passing yards to Marvin Harrison. But I just kind of feel like after that spring game, Ohio State fans had some disquiet. And they didn't expect the offense to look the way it did. And I think that there's going to be a serious drop-off. Now, maybe you're going to get JTT and Sawyer just rampaging through the Big Ten. But, I mean, aside from a couple of crazy interceptions against Penn State. Honestly, JTT didn't do a whole lot last year. He didn't do a whole lot against Michigan. So it just feels like, given the performance levels we've seen from these guys in the Big Ten previously, like I think that they're going to be searching for answers, and maybe they're going to find some. Maybe McCord will come through, but like for the first time in a long time, they're not just going to reload with an NFL ready quarterback. I mean, I just can't see that given his performance so far.
Meanwhile, in the yesterday, it seemed like Mel Tucker was, as opposed to looking to the big picture of the season, was only obsessed with Michigan.
He's a real Spartan now.
Yeah.
I'm about to say he's a Michigan State head
Michigan
football coach.
State University, man.
That's the number one job requirement. Is
I mean, they do have other games on their schedule. They are
Do
playing.
they really have other games on their schedule?
You
Do they
would
really?
think. And but the obsession on Michigan was quite astounding to me, as opposed to talking.
What is
about
the
his
only
team or
thing
the
that
rest
man
of
has
the-
accomplished at Michigan State? What's his own? What's the only thing he has on his resume? It's
He
his
brought Kenneth Walker in
career
for the
versus
transfer
Michigan.
portal.
He
Well,
bought
they
one
had
of
a
those.
good year first year. Yeah,
He
with
bought one of
Kenneth
those
Walker.
three-wheeled motorcycles.
Oh,
And everybody knows that if you have a motorcycle with three wheels, you're a pretty cool dude.
yeah, I know that. Oh well. Anyway,
like-
that.
I think people are misinterpreting his quote though. Like they asked him like, how do you rein in all the hatred at Michigan, and he's just like, I can't do it. People are saying that like, he's stoking it or something like that. The man is telling you he has no control over his team.
Yeah, it's a very Bobby Williams quote, though, isn't it? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's got $97 million to give that answer.
I'm responsible for these people. What are you talking about?
It's not really an answer for a guy who's a leader. It's like, I don't know. I'm just going along with what's going on. Like, okay.
Yeah.
I showed up, and the only thing they talk about is hating Michigan. What do you want me to do? Like, take down the
Right.
sign?
Our fans are mad. Our administration mad. Our players are mad. They hit other guys over the head with their helmets after the game. Yeah, we're all mad. I mean, you're right. It's the same old Bobby Williams stuff.
Yeah, there wasn't much to. I honestly, there was not a lot yesterday in general. I did get a laugh or two out of Kirk Ferentz, amazingly enough. Maybe because he's so dry, he can make you subtly laugh. He was talking about the end of the trade with Jake Rudock and Cade. It was subtly funny. Although I think we all made that joke.
Player to be named later.
Yeah, we made that joke a while ago, but still. But really, the other takeaway was this comment from getting back to Ryan Day and saying silly things. Ryan Day suggested that it would be a good idea to move the game up to earlier in the season. So does this become the dumbest thing that you've heard Coach Third Base say lately?
No, I think the hang 100 and then getting halfway there in 2 years is still number one.
Yeah, that one's a whopper.
I don't want to do it, but there is a case for it. I just don't think that the rematch is going to be something that happens frequently with USC and UCLA in the league and Penn State released from their purgatory. And if the Big Ten's smart, they're going to give a couple of those teams some cake schedules to prevent the Michigan-Ohio State rematch, which I don't think anybody wants.
There's a chance that, well, first of all, TV ratings will show that people want it. The ratings will be through the roof if they get it. So Awful Announcing, who I read a lot for sports coverage, they had a great headline yesterday after that comment. It said, Ryan Day suggests the game could move, which is absurd. And they go through and they give a whole bunch of reasons why they think it's bad. But they gave the one thing, they talked about the moving it up because of so they don't play back-to-back argument. They talked about when Miami joined the ACC. They said this would be a good idea to split Miami and Florida State up so they don't play each other in the last game and then again in the championship game. Since Miami joined the ACC, they have not made it to the championship game to play Florida State. It's never happened. So I think a lot of this concern, like to your point, Brian, is over things that might happen occasionally. It would have happened last year, but it would not have happened a lot. And it probably won't happen a ton in the future.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that I would personally, as a Michigan fan, I would accept a rider that the loser of the Michigan-Ohio State game is eliminated from competing in the Big Ten championship game. Like that's not fair. But I would be like, that's fine. Let's just.
I've been on this. Yeah, I've been on this forever. I can't stand any rematches. That's why I wanted this whole showcase thing instead of just play the best game that was not played yet. I cannot stand rematches. All you can do is destroy information. Your college football season gives you so little information to begin with, right? You only get 12 games. And then you're supposed to just to get rid of one of those games. Is the best you're going to get is learning the same team that won should win again. Or you could have a 1-1 situation. It's terrible. I hate the whole concept. But Ryan Day, of all people, remember, he's 31-2 in the Big Ten. That man wants this game to matter as little as possible. Play it in September.
I figured part of it was about the weather because it's not going to snow in October or, for that matter, September. But they actually had really good weather in Columbus last year, and it definitely did not help them. They lost by more than they lost up here. Some things just don't need to be messed with. I just don't. And in the grand scheme of things, I think Brian's point also about, and your guys' points about, creating schedules so that other teams, somebody's going to not play Michigan or Ohio State in the same, or USC for that matter, in the same season. It's going to come out in their schedule that way. And an inbound schedule is going to put one of those teams, they're going to be undefeated, right? Because they didn't play any of the toughest teams. And it'll be kind of like a Big Ten West champion getting there. And they'll play one of those toughest teams that they didn't play and probably get rolled in Indianapolis. But that'll probably happen occasionally as well to keep those rematches from happening. And that would allow that to not happen. So,
yeah, I think things are good. We don't even know right now what the Big Ten's going to look like next year, do we? I mean, are there going to be divisions? Are there not going to be divisions?
They announced. They gave us all the matchups, and the locked-in rivals.
Yeah.
If you get locked into up to 3 rivals, and if you didn't, they just gave you they partnered you with schools for the couple years, and it's going to rotate after a couple of years. They said they'll rotate after a couple of years so they can spread you around. And the schedules are out, and they did give a little bit of a semblance of a format. Okay. And then TD talked about that yesterday, saying that he liked that ability to be as flexible as possible. I think it's just a talking point to talk about why he likes the schedule they come up with, which is, I don't know, kind of a random schedule as opposed to like the 3-6-6 model, but I digress.
It's a 2-year schedule. So what this schedule told me is they want to get the Michigan USC game in. They want to get Ohio State USC in, and then they want to, be ready and not have to blow everything up again when they expand again, because they are definitely not done. And this is, a stopgap measure because they had to add 2 teams. There was no way to do it with divisions that made any kind of sense. USC and UCLA didn't want to just be tacked on to the West. And this is the way to do it. If you throw USC and UCLA on the West, you're not going to get the games that matter. And it's just a rule. Anytime a team joins the Big Ten, they have to play Michigan. Do you know what the last team to join the Big Ten and not play Michigan was? Ohio State.
Probably Chicago.
No, it was Ohio. It was Ohio State because Michigan wasn't in the Big Ten at the time. Ohio State had to cancel their Michigan game so they could join the Big Ten.
Oh, that was back in when Yost pulled them out of the league. Yeah.
Yep.
All history always comes around and finds a way to get brought up and is always very relevant and interesting. So.
I mean, Craig wrote about the origins of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry this year in Hail to the Victim. That was his article. It was like the first year that Michigan plays Ohio State. And then we get to that game, and it's like a side note. It's like, and then they played some chumps from Ohio State. But the real game against the Yeomen.
Yeah, the real game was against Oberlin that year, not Ohio State. Because Ohio State was a much smaller school than Oberlin College, aside from anything else, and much newer to football.
Well, and if we have time at the end of the segment or the end of the show, we may talk a little bit about Colorado. But I find the history stuff is becoming really fascinating, how a lot of these storylines can get brought back. And maybe you're talking about Oberlin, who's not involved in the conversation, but you talk about out west, the old Pacific Coast Conference, when it became the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, I guess, whatever it was.
It was a Pac-8 originally.
Pac-8.
But
then they had the Arizonas.
The original conference was not the LA schools, but it was Oregon State and Oregon, which Eugene was really much a cow town at that point in time. And it was like Idaho and some of the schools like that are, kind of like the schools that they're going to get back with if you're Oregon State and you're Washington State. They actually made sense to be in that conference back in the 50s. And they're going to end up back, at least some of those schools, back in that conference with them again when the Pac-12 dissolves. We'll get to that later on. But it's the same thing with the Big Ten as things evolve, and you just see Michigan has not played Ohio State in the last game of the year. outside of the COVID season since 1935. Well, 34 was the last time they didn't do it. 35 was when it started. Some things don't need to change.
Yeah. The one thing, if you're bringing up the PCC, the reason why that conference fell apart is because they all started tattling to each other to the NCAA. I don't know why I'm bringing that up as a lesson right now, but I would suggest if someone wants to look at history and see what happens to conferences that seem very powerful and are in very good shape and why they fall apart, tallying on each other was the reason the PCC fell apart.
Yeah, they said it started with when they brought the LA schools in, it expanded the size of the scope of the conference, and then it got really it's been a lot dirtier out west. It's been a lot dirtier out west than they would ever like to.
Was like, you mean what I'm cheating? Look what they're doing at Washington. Washington's like, well, I learned this from UCLA, and then all of a sudden they're all implicated and they're all banned, and it was a mess.
Yeah, pretty much. It's actually pretty fascinating stuff to read as we're going through all these waves of realignment and Colorado going back where they came from. But all right, we do have to get a break in, so we're gonna take this break in. We're gonna talk more about Big Ten Media Days and maybe a little bit about the Pac 10, 9, 11, whatever they're gonna end up being on the other side of the break as well here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. And we're still on Ticket TV, live on here. And there was a Buckeye in the chat for a little while for those that are watching, but dude couldn't even spell Buckeyes right.
Is that?
I just got rid of him. I didn't want to deal with it.
The Buckeye who's there, if he is a Buckeye, is incoherent to me.
Well, then he's a Buckeye. But yeah, he was pretty incoherent, and I didn't want his incoherence on our chat, so I got rid of him.
Yeah, I mean, complete drivel and nonsense. But I don't know. Whatever.
So we had this question early on. See if I can find it back. Oh, here we go. David asked, who was the toughest non-conference opponent?
Probably ECU. But ECU last year, so ECU, they're coming off a year that was supposed to be the year, and they missed. And the thing they missed was field goals. So they were they lost a couple games by 2 and another game by 1 that they could have, kicked any of many field goal attempts.
Yeah,
and
they were what?
The problem is they graduated everybody.
Yeah, they were like 8-5, right? Something like that last year.
Yeah.
And they've lost a couple of close games, but yeah, they lose everybody, or they lost more than half their team.
Yeah. The team they remind me of is when we played Middle Tennessee State a few years ago, and they were coming off the year, and they graduated their 4-year quarterback and a whole bunch of other guys who were really important, but they looked really strong because they were coming off just 3 or 4 years of having a competitive team. But then everyone was gone and they were starting fresh, but they still they had some guys who hadn't played yet because they were behind guys who went to the NFL or were close to going to the NFL. And they gave us a bit of a game after Patterson injured himself on the first play. God, I love bringing up great memories, don't I?
Yeah. Well, UNLV looks wretched, right? And Bowling Green, I'm dreading that game.
They have gotten better every single year that your friend has been the head coach down there. So they're improving from 127th to 125th in the country, but they are improvements.
Yeah, they have an NFL tight end that people don't know about, but they do. And they had a pretty good quarterback last year. Paul McDonald's son, who was a quarterback at the Browns, has been the quarterback at Bowling Green, but he's gone. I think they've got the guy from Indiana will be who played against us last year in the Indiana game. Yeah, I think he's at Bowling Green.
And Bowling Green, yeah.
And they have a really nice running back who could play in the Big Ten named Hilaire. But their lines, I don't know how they're going to hold up.
They had a great guard last year. I was watching all of their games from last year to write the Hail of Victors preview, and I'm circling on this guard. I'm like, okay, I love it when there's a guard that I can appreciate, because no one else is going to call out a guard from Bowling Green. I'll be like, watch this guy. And I already have it written up. He had his own paragraph because they had plays that went right behind him. And the guy gets picked up in the portal. Now that he's gone. It's okay, they got that paragraph.
That's the hardest part about being Bowling Green, right? Is you get guys like that, and then they're like, I'm out.
Right, and they
have a lot of continuity there.
They know that unfortunately they're kind of can be a way station for kids that for whatever reason aren't in the Big Ten, but will be if they, if they pan out. And so it's sort of not a great spot for MAC schools or other smaller schools to be in. It feels it's difficult for them, and I feel sorry for these programs because it's a very difficult way to go. Right
It
now.
is, but honestly, he's kind of built his program on like not being a portal team. So they lost a lot fewer guys than they could have. They could have lost Darren Anders, who's that great middle linebacker they have. So I mean, they'll get picked off and they'll have to grab a guy in the portal. But compared to other teams on their level, there was a lot less movement at Bowling Green, and I think that they're going to be kind of this team that does it the old-fashioned way. And since no one else is doing that, developing your own players who aren't going to be Big Ten players, it might be a way to go, and he might have a future there. I can see it working. It's probably not going to work this year. They're probably not going to give Michigan a game, but I can see it working in the MAC eventually.
Yeah, I talked to the athletic. I go to as many Bowling Green games as I can, and I talked to the athletic director last year on the field, and he was really he's new, not a youngish guy, new guy there, and he was like, "Yeah, Scott's got a job here as long as he wants it." So I was really happy to hear that at least institutionally, they're not setting any sort of artificial benchmarks.
Yeah, it'd be funny seeing Scott Lawford coaching against Mike Hart that week.
Yeah, I know.
Welcome back to the MGoBlog Roundtable segment of the Michigan Insider here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. We are online at WTK.com. We're spent a lot of time recapping day one of Big Ten Media Days. Today is day 2 of Big Ten Media Days. Jim Harbaugh at 12:30 at the podium. I know what we want him to do when he starts out. What do you think, Seth, he's actually going to talk about this morning when he gets up to the podium, or this afternoon when he gets to the podium? What do you think he's actually going to highlight today?
I think he's going to turn to whoever's sitting next to him and be like, this guy right here had a great season. Talk to this guy and just like walk away.
Well, that's what he wants to do after games, right? He does that every game, right? Yeah, they come to interview Harbaugh and he goes, "Nah, talk to him. I'm out of here." So,
I mean, what do you want from this guy? I mean, the whole point of whoever released it, whoever put this in the press, right? Whoever leaked out what the deal is going to be was to make sure that some Spartan media could be there to ask him questions he can't answer at Big Ten Media Days. I don't care about the questions. I really don't care about the answers. Everything that I get out of Big Ten Media Days are from those, like I said, when someone goes and interviews people off the record about the other teams. I love those articles. That's the only thing I get out of this.
Yeah, the thing that I take out of Jim, and Brian, I want your thoughts on this as well. It's tone. I don't take out like commentary as much as his tone. And Jim, like last year, like you could tell he really liked his team. He was really excited to be there, and he's not always excited to be there. And even with the news coming out this week and the annoyance that I'm sure it is for him, he really likes his team. So I'm looking forward to just seeing his tone. I don't actually expect him to say a whole lot about other than saying he's got great players and highlighting some of those guys when he gets asked about them. But I do think he's going to have that tone that we've seen from him at different places, Sound Mind, Sound Body, wherever he's been, and he's talked to the media and he's like, "Yeah, I'm ready to talk to you all. Let's go. I'm happy to do it." Because that, as you guys know, is not necessarily Jim's MO all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I hadn't thought of it, but I think you have a good point, Ira, that, how he presents as opposed to what he says may be a lot more important than anything else.
Nathan Schroeder wants somebody to ask him about his favorite burger places.
I don't know. I'm a vegetarian.
I don't think anyone on the Michigan beat is going to ask that question, but someone on a different beat might, like the Michigan State student newspaper. I got my money on them.
There's always somebody, right, that wants to get their pound of flesh and their attention. They shout out their name, their media affiliation. The camera goes on them on Big Ten Network, and they're like, "Yeah, I get to ask you a question." Somebody always has one of those questions for Jim, and he always usually laughs.
The state news is far better behaved than the rest of the Spartan media. I mean, Graham Couch might ask that question, or who's a Hondo? I'm putting money on Hondo.
Yeah, he's pretty good about that. What about the one of their coaches that's speaking today? All of a sudden, there was a new story that came out yesterday about PJ Fleck. Did you guys read that one and take anything out of that article about PJ Fleck yesterday and the alleged program culture, or is it more
the nothing burger? Like, we all knew that PJ Fleck was weird. Like, that's not a surprise. We know that. And the things described were like, oh, they are really obsessive about our weight. It's like, it's a football program, bro. Like none of the stuff described in that PJ Fleck thing rises to the level of unexpected, let alone scandalous.
Well, if he lies about the nothing burger, he may get suspended. But beyond that, this seemed like a non-story to me. It seemed like mostly clickbait and nothing of real merit, unless you saw
what they
something
said
else.
Is that what they said is that they use extra workouts beyond what's what they're allowed to mandate if you get in trouble, which to me said you've never heard about football in your entire life, because every single football team going back to middle school, you screw up, you run. Like that's how it is. That is how every single football team operates. When I started reading, I was like, who does not know how to follow up this question? Who does not? What's going on here?
Yeah, it was. It got a little bit of traction. I'm curious if he gets any questions, just to, just like with Jim. Does it become a distraction for him today? But PJ is such a weird guy; he can probably flip the question into some really weird, unique answer about rowing the boat and some other weird stuff.
Yeah. Honestly, the whole you got to clap for this guy when he enters the room is. I'm like, oh yeah, that's PJ Fleck in a nutshell. I was just like, oh yeah, I completely expected that. So
yeah.
PJ Fleck should just go to the podium and be like, I'm a weird guy. What do you want? I like affirmation. Who doesn't like affirmation?
Yeah, it is a little weird that when he walks up to you and he says, "How you doing?" you have to answer elite.
I mean,
I know. I'm not saying that it's criminal or it's just dumb. I'm not saying that it's worthy of being a part of an article and that it's this bad thing. But what if a guy what if you are having a bad day and you wanted to talk to your coach about it and you have to say you're elite? It seems a little bit off.
I mean, I don't know. If you've ever been to a coaching clinic, you quickly realize that all football coaches have these things. Mm-hmm. And the only difference is the degrees of weirdness. Remember the Harbaugh whiteboard? Where he's got
the quote board. I sat in his office. I helped contribute quotes to the quote board.
Well, so that's a pretty weird quote board.
Yeah,
but it's just those sorts of slogans and I mean, I tried to coach my son's soccer team when he was in kindergarten. I quickly realized that there's a reason for all that stuff, because you can't get people to pay attention to you unless you're this weird cliche robot. And I mean, yeah, that kind of stuff, just I expect that from anybody who's trying to teach anyone anything. So there's some stuff in there that I think it makes me glad that PJ Fleck isn't the head coach of the University of Michigan, but nothing that I'm like, oh yeah, this guy needs to be suspended or fired or anything like that. It's just just a weird guy doing weird stuff, and he's a football coach. They're all weird. You got to be weird to be a head football coach.
Yes, the best ones are a little bit weird. Yes, that's true.
Also, the worst ones. All of them.
That's true. You have a point.
Remember Ron
yesterday?
Ron Zucker's a weird.
I love that guy. But you notice yesterday, somebody was testifying in front of Congress, someone from the Defense Department telling Congress that, yes, we have UFOs and, yes, we have some alien material. And people are freaking out, except college football Twitter, who were like, yes, we know there are aliens among us. Now, would you shut up? They're having their Big Ten meetings right now.
Yeah, like the scene in Men in Black when they put on the board who all the actual aliens are. Dennis Rodman. Somebody else. Yeah,
when the story came out about how they talked to Ted Lasso, Jason Sudeikis talked to Jim Harbaugh when he was developing Ted Lasso, and one of the quotes in there was, there was a lot of things that Harbaugh gave us that we wanted to use that we decided was just too weird. We could not put on television because no one believed a coach would do that.
And that I don't. It doesn't
Yeah,
surprise me.
yeah.
Brian, it's funny that you say you talk about doing that with kids because the amount of times that in my conversations, like with Jim or with others, and like people will bring up, narratives the fans talk about or the media talks about, and they're like, that is not a locker room thing. That's not a coach thing. No one ever talks about that stuff. But also vice versa. We hear things that coaches do or say, and we're like, huh, it's so weird. But it resonates in the locker room. And that's the only place that it has to resonate is within those rooms, the walls, the locker room. So apparently PJ Fleck's message did not resonate with everybody, is what it really comes down
That's
to.
always going to be the case. I mean, I'm sure there's guys like Ben St. Juste who think Michigan did him wrong. And I think every program has guys who it doesn't work for. And they wash out and they're bitter about it. And this feels like more of that than anything like the Northwestern stuff that happened. It felt like, especially on the heels of the Northwestern stuff, it feels like, all right, I'm going to come forward. I'm going to blow the whistle on this, but there's not really anything so far that I've seen that warrants anything except I don't know. As PJ Fleck goes into the athletic director's office and the athletic director is like, hey, could you be less weird? And PJ Fleck's like, no, I can't.
That's why I am.
The athletic director is like,
Weird,
all right.
weird is power, and the power is inside of me. And because when you do is you take the power and you pull it inside of you, and then you spread it around to everybody, and that's how we become powerful, and that's how we become a coefficient.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Good answer. That was a good coach answer there. Seth.
I mean, there's like, I mean, remember the Washington State coach who got fired because he was an anti-vaxxer? I was surprised that didn't happen to more. Like, I was surprised that there weren't like 4 or 5 guys who were like, I would rather lose millions of dollars than comply with this extremely basic requirement.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim Beckman. Remember Tim Beckman?
Tim Beckman, yeah.
He's a great one. He's one of the all-time greats in the history of the Big Ten Conference. I love that guy.
We say Otsky, and that stands for our success comes from the knowledge. The other E stands for effort.
I forgot about the gems that were Tim Beckman. Thank you for the comic relief as we end this Thursday edition of the Michigan Insider with this.
Aren't you on the board? Can't you play that for everybody right now?
I have a shirt with what he said at that press conference because somebody was like, "I'll put this on a shirt," and I'm like, "I'm buying that." And my only regret is I didn't buy like 4 of them because now it's pretty old and it doesn't really fit me.
And no one remembers him anyway.
That's fine. That part's great. I love that part.
Well,
We do have a shirt department, Brian.
That's true. You could make your own. That's true. You have a store, a shirt department.
An Illinois fan put it together, and I felt like I should buy it from the Illinois fan.
Way to support Illinois. They appreciate that. So next week at this time, guys, fall camp will be getting underway. Media days will be obviously concluded. So football conversations will continue to ramp up as we are today, 37 days away into the start of the season. So just over 5 weeks away. Seth, Brian, Craig, appreciate your time as always. We'll see you guys next week. And thanks to everybody for listening. This has been the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, Ann Arbor, a Cumulus station.
I fear it's going to